Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
And today we're going to talk about the Gambling Control Bill, which is going to be published in September 2021. We're going to have a gambling regulator in 2023. And all this started in 2013. So it's taken almost, by the time we have our regulator established, it will have taken the government 10 years to get this together, which is completely ridiculous. So the draft bill dates back to 2013. In Ireland, there's a spend of 9.8 billion on gambling, and it's just out of control altogether. We've Michael D. Higgins talking about it. We have a lot of people talking about it, but they've been talking about it for too long, since 2013.
That's right. Thanks, Oliver. I'm going to just cover this under addictions, but I'll pay special attention to this gambling. It's a form of addiction. And the fact is that at the present time, they must have increased if they're doing what they say they're doing after 13 years. The trouble is, up to some years ago, I don't know when they did what they did, but up to some years ago, bookies' offices were open from I think about 10 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening. And I think 5 or 6 days a week. They certainly were never open on a Sunday. For some years now, which is the problem, and funny enough, I haven't seen it alluded to in the various things that you were talking about there. The problem is that they're open now 7 days a week to 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And there's gambling not just on horse races and so on and so forth in this country, but throughout the world. So they're backing horses and all the rest of it 7 days a week. And particularly bookies are often located near pubs. Now, pubs have been closed, but prior to them closing, people that were in pubs and they wouldn't be in a fit state to make a rational decision were running into the bookies and backwards and forwards and shouting at the television 7 days a week. You couldn't go in to have a quiet chat, perhaps a coffee or a pint, have a quiet chat with a friend with the shouting at the television 7 days a week, morning to night. An absolute disaster and a strange way to treat the Sabbath, for example, Sunday, which such a place should be closed without a shadow of doubt and should never be open for the hours that they are, encouraging gambling of the worst antisocial order imaginable. You're talking about addictions. In this case, there's two addictions, perhaps the addiction to alcohol and the addiction to gambling. But the trouble is now, aside from the gambling in the establishments, there's also the scourge of internet gambling. That's one area that should be closed down forthwith. I believe it's banned in a lot of countries. It's banned in the US because the ones that were inflicting this, they were trying to inflict it throughout the world, but they were stopped to do that in the US. There's no gambling. There's casinos in the US, but there is no thing like bookies, what we have here. Also, there is no bookies on the continent. The only other country that has it is our neighbour. This country, Britain, that we copy slavishly whatever they do. So the first thing before they start coming to make decisions and with committees and what knows what vis-a-vis gambling, close the bookies the way they did years ago, so that they close at 5 o'clock and never open on a Sunday. That's one way. What they're proposing is laws, and many of the laws that we have now are obeyed, do you know?
I would say very few.
Now you're talking. So you can have laws coming out your ears, but it's a question of the culture and it's a question of addictions. How do you deal with the gambling addiction and the various other addictions that are taking place? What underpins these addictions, do you think?
I suppose the lack of belief in anything, I suppose.
Well, it's a lack of it's self. It's me. It's doing your own thing, irrespective of the consequences on your own health, and of course on the economical and health of anybody dependent on you. If you have an addiction to any, be it to gambling, alcohol or drugs, or pornography, or sexual freedom, be you heterosexual, in other words, too many people that you are abusing from in the sexual area, be it heterosexual or any other affliction that people have by way of addictions to sexual activity. This is self again. No respect for their own individual gift that they have as a human being. Abusing the gifts that was bestowed on them from the time that they were born, made in the image of likeness of God. This is something that probably is foreign to their belief system. Christians have at least a chance, because they know they are doing wrong if they ever meditate. The first thing is respect for yourself, and respect then for others. If you have that fundamental belief, whether you're a Christian or an atheist or an agnostic or some other peculiarity of your human nature, recognizing nobody, you have to recognize respect. It's a universal concept applying to all people, young and old. It's not something that's strange to any person. So that's the number one. If you're a Christian, there's a great safeguard for Christians, Catholics and Christians. For Catholics particularly, the great sacrament of confession is available for them. They can offload the self-interest and their selfishness that they possess. First of all, respect yourself, and the way to do that is, if you're a Catholic, you avail of the sacrament of confession, where the priest is in the place of Christ, in vino Christo, I think they call it. So therefore, you can be absolved of these things and heave a sigh of relief as you leave that confession box. Assuming you're not a Christian, but if you're not a Christian, say in some other denomination, well then there's a system by way of confessing if you have these addictions to any of the things I just mentioned, or addictions to anything that's not wholesome, and that is all to do with self. If you're able to, if you have a system in your Christian religion, or in the Muslim religion, if you're addicted as well, you can deal with it in the way that your church or in the Muslim faith dictates. As far as I know, most Muslims don't actually drink, so they're not suffering from alcohol addiction, but they could have other addictions, and that is taking account of that for individual human beings. That's number one. It was often said that there's no atheists in foxholes, or if you're in an aeroplane and there's a great danger of it crashing. I think there's not too many people that suddenly don't call on somebody to try and help them and rescue them. Something like that. So these are the sorts of situations where addictions are concerned, and the state and the law has some responsibility in these areas to devise their laws to protect the citizen. So far as regards The gambling addiction, they've done nothing except to make it more easy for people with that sort of addiction of gambling to pursue it. And we haven't heard too much from any other source about how to try and get rid of these addictions. In other words, to have respect for yourself and for those that might be dependent on you. If you have that, irrespective of whether you're a Christian or an atheist, you will do something about it. That's number one. And seek help then. If you're an atheist, seek it with whatever counsellors you can go to. And all these are the cures for the human being. If they put themselves and want to indulge in whatever it is that they are addicted to, well, then they'll have to take responsibility for that. And the only way to get out of it is to have respect for themselves.
There are some measures that we were talking about putting in place. One was self-excluding, where you have your accounts banned inside the bookie, so they know your accounts and that you're basically banned. So when you ring up or you go online, you can't place a bet. But then there was a leading bookmaker who actually started, like the drug addicts in the city centre, offering them free methadone or whatever. The bookie, one of Ireland's leading bookies, started giving them free bets. They wouldn't ban them from the bookies. This was to continue to feed the addiction, which was completely wrong, right? There are measures. There's one thing I would like to see, and 7 years ago I got a political journalist that I know to write to Dáil Éireann, to a couple of TDs. I'd like to see bookies banned from being next door to a pub. Okay,
correct.
They should be within the planning laws should be such that they have to be within such a radius of, say, a mile, a kilometre, 2 kilometres, whatever it is. But they cannot be within the radius because it's too easy for a drunken man to spend his money.
Correct.
And the other thing that needs to happen is that online gambling should close maybe at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, because people are gambling right into the all hours.
Well, I think it actually should be closed altogether. It's not something that's socially acceptable, because there are people with addictions. It's the same as anything else that's addictive that's on the internet, like pornography and stuff like that. They're so quick to ban people that are conservative and have Christian principles. They're very easy to ban those.
That's right.
But they don't ban something that destroys the human psyche, the human spirit. For goodness sake, and it interrupts marriages, because there are addictions out there of what I'm talking about. So it's fair to say that these internet companies that claim to have some kind of a body that will check this, that and the other, check the pornography and leave the Christian and conservative people alone to express their civilised opinions. They're not going to inflict any addictions on anybody like what pornography and stuff like that. Have respect for the human being, for the people that are vulnerable and can destroy their nature. So there's a lot of responsibility on internet companies for the various addictions, and there's also responsibility on the individual themselves, because there's so many attractions and seductions, and the media promote all sorts of stuff, the general media, that's liable to lead to the corruption of the individual.
Ireland has the 7th highest spend in the world on gambling. I mean, and that's probably why the government has taken 10 years. For example, this idea came about 2013, a gambling regulator. And by the time he's established, it's going to be 10 years later, 2023, right? So it's taken 10 years to do this. But yet, if you look at the coronavirus legislation for passports for restaurants to get into them and out of them, whatever, it has taken a couple of weeks.
That's what you call control. That's another dangerous thing. But suffice to say that the regulations and numbers. Now, John Malone doesn't place much faith in the like of that, kicking the ball down the road. It's obvious. It's quite obvious even at the present time that something should be done immediately, and it should be to limit the hours at the bookie offices. They're not in other countries. Full stop.
Yeah.
Now they're in the EU. do they visit countries and do they have their eyes open? They haven't got those bookie offices. So the people in those countries, whatever other addictions they might be subjected to, it's not gambling into going into bookies' offices and coming out of whatever sort of a establishment they're in. By the way, their establishments, generally speaking, and most parts of France closes quite early, 9 o'clock. There's no bookies' offices. The only country that has them is this country and Britain. Now, is that not self-evident? Is that beyond them to realise that and to actually ban them altogether? Never mind what they're at, regulating them.
I suppose, look, the tax take is too high. When you see like a 9.8 billion spend on gambling, you can see that the government is getting a lot of money.
Well, you see, what are the other countries doing that haven't got this? I mean, they're not all bankrupt. This is ill-gotten money, this billions that you're talking about. Absolutely. That is corrupt money. They shouldn't be basing any decision on the like of that.
Well, I'm going to read out a paragraph for you, right? Okay, and this kind of sums up gambling, and I think it's a very, very good one for the government. So, found this online. It's very, very good, and here it goes. Gambling, as a means of acquiring material gain by chance and at the neighbour's expense, is a menace to personal character and social morality.
Correct.
Gambling fosters greed and stimulates the fatalistic faith in chance. Organised and commercial gambling is a threat to business, breeds crime and poverty, and is destructive to the interests of good government. It encourages the belief that work is unimportant, that money can solve all the problems, and that greed is the norm for achievement. It serves as a regressive tax on those with lower income. In summary, gambling is bad economics, gambling is bad public policy, and gambling does not improve the quality of life.
Well, you see, it's after covering all those things.